Hello everyone, welcome to the first part of a new tutorial series I'm working on in which I will be taking y'all step by step through the process of creating a cat in Blender. This tutorial series is meant to be as beginner friendly as possible, so you should be able to start here with no prior knowledge of Blender, and by the end hopefully you'll have a fully animation ready character model as well as an understanding of the animation pipeline from start to finish. Without further ado, let's get started. Here I've already cleared my scene by pressing the A key, then hitting delete. Go to Edit Preferences, and then click Add-ons and type in Images. Make sure the box next to Import Images as Planes is checked. Next, download the 3 sketches linked in the description, and move them over to your working folder, otherwise known as the folder you've saved your blend file in. You'll be using these as your references. Switch to Material View, then in Object Mode, click Add, Image, Images as Planes. Select the 3 sketches and import them. They'll be lying flat at first, so to fix that, select them all by pressing A, then click R to rotate, the X key to rotate only on the X axis, then type in 90 to rotate it exactly 90 degrees. We won't be needing the paw image right now, so move it out of the way and turn its visibility off. Click and drag to box select the remaining images, then press S to scale them up. You'll want to position them so the front-facing reference is actually facing to the front, so select it separately, then press R, then Z, then type in 90 to rotate it 90 degrees on the Z axis. Position your references so they look like this. Now we can begin modeling. Still in Object Mode, add a cube. Switch to Edit Mode, select everything with A, then right-click the cube and choose Subdivide. Expand the corner pop-up menu and turn Smoothness all the way up, and change the number of subdivisions to 2. Add a loop cut along the X-axis. Make sure you don't drag the mouse when clicking to add the loop cut, otherwise the cut will become off-center. Go into the X side view or orthographic view, turn on X-ray mode, then click and drag to box select all the vertices on the other side of the loop cut you've made. Then press delete and choose vertices. Now go into the Modifiers tab to add a mirror modifier. You'll likely need to change the axis from X to Y. Make sure clipping is enabled. Switch back to Object Mode and view your scene from the Y side view and scale the sphere down with the S key. Position at the shoulders of your reference by clicking and dragging it into place. Back in Edit Mode, switch selection type from vertices to planes, then select the sphere's 9 side planes by either shift-clicking or pressing C to use the brush select. Turn on Proportional Editing, then scale these faces down. Move them downward on the Z axis, then switch to Edge Selection Mode to reposition the bottom 3 edges like so. Use your mouse's scroll wheel to adjust how much influence proportional editing has over the surrounding edges. Once your former sphere looks like this, reselect the 9 faces you'd selected before and delete them, this time choosing the Delete Faces option in the drop-down menu. Go into the X-axis orthographic view with Edge Select enabled. Then select the edge loop you just opened up by pressing the Alt key while clicking on one of the edges. It may take a few tries to get the right loop, but once you've got it, begin lining everything up with your reference. I recommend adding a loop cut here to make repositioning easier. You'll also want to look from the Y-axis to make sure you're matching up with both references. An important thing to note is that cats have no collarbone, which makes their fronts very slender. It's what allows them to fit through small spaces. Because of this, from the front view, cats' front legs appear to almost be attached. In the reference, I've marked out where the shoulders extend and where the ribcage is. If you make the cat's chest follow that line, you'll end up with a much more realistic look. Once you've lined up the front view and the chest, use proportional editing at a very high strength to make the shoulder the correct length. Go back to front view. Loop select the open edge loop by Alt-clicking it, then press E to extrude it downward. Rotate the new vertices with the R key, then scale it down to match the reference. You'll also want to scale it down on the Z axis by pressing S, then Z. This will flatten out the vertices and make your topography so much cleaner. Continue to adjust the vertices to make your model more closely resemble the reference image. Once it looks close enough, edge loop select the leg again and extrude it a couple of times to the elbow. Rotate and scale the new extrusions as needed. Once you reach the elbow, make a very long extrusion and bring it down to the wrist. Scale it accordingly, then add edge loops along the leg to allow it to deform properly. If you scroll your mouse wheel before you click to make the loop cut, you can choose how many loops you want to make, saving even more time. With that done, look around the model and make adjustments as needed. Remember to make the slight indentation between the shoulder blades. Try to keep each face as close to square as possible while still maintaining the model's shape. You can add edge loops to help with this, but use them sparingly to keep it at a lower polygon count. Once you're happy with how the shoulders look, select the 6 back-facing faces and delete them so we can add the torso later. Now we can move on to the hindquarters. We'll be using the same basic principles for the hip that we use for the shoulders, so this should be a bit easier. In Object Mode, add a cube, switch to Edit Mode, subdivide twice with the smoothness all the way up, loop cut down the middle, and delete everything on the other side of the loop cut. Make sure you delete the same side you deleted when making the shoulders. In object mode, scale down the sphere and move it into place. Then select the shoulders and press Ctrl J to join the two objects together. Back in edit mode, delete the 9 side faces. Turn on X-ray mode, box select the front legs, and then press H to hide them. Now it'll be easier to work on the hind legs. Loop select the hole in the hind legs by holding down Alt while you click it and scale it down on the Y-axis by again pressing S, Y, then dragging the cursor inward. As with the front legs, view the hindquarters from the front X orthographic view and try to match the sides up with a reference. A cat's hindquarters are very similar width to its forequarters, so only the front reference is necessary. Extrude the loop downward and scale and rotate as needed. Leave proportional editing enabled to keep the shapes looking natural. Once you've pulled it down to the knee, extrude again to bring it to the ankle. Again, add loop cuts to clean up the topography. Press the Alt and H keys to unhide the forelegs. Select the 3 front-facing faces on the hindquarters and delete them. Select the vertices around the new opening and move them into an almost oval shape. Count the vertices around the hole in the shoulders and in the hindquarters. If the numbers don't match up, add a loop cut or two as needed to the one with less until they're equal. Now select the bottom center vertex of the hindquarters and the bottom center vertex of the forequarters and press F to connect them. Using edge selection mode, shift-click the new edge and the 2 adjacent edges, then hit F again to fill the area with a face. Now all you have to do is click the new face's open edge and then press F until the entire open area is filled. Loop cut the torso a few times and then pull the ribcage out a bit. Switch to sculpt mode. Use the smooth tool to make the transitions between the shoulders, torso, and hips look more natural. Only use this for larger adjustments right now. Smaller tweaks should be made in edit mode since it gives you more control over vertex placement. One of these tweaks is adding a primordial pouch, otherwise known as a belly flap. Most domestic cats and even some wild species have this pouch to protect their vital organs when fighting. I like to try to add it to my models to make them more realistic, but it's not necessary, especially if you're going for a more cartoonish or stylized look. As you're adjusting things, remember to look at your model from multiple angles, since something that looks good from one angle might actually appear very distorted from another. Also use the X and Y orthographic views to make sure everything matches up with your reference. At this point, you should now have a basic cat body with legs. To make sure your topography is correct for animation, go into edit mode with face select turned on and Alt-click to loop select the faces around the legs. If the loops go all the way around the legs, you're good to go. If it selected the wrong loop, don't panic. You may have to click the faces beside it a few times before the program gets it right. Okay, this model looks really blocky right now, so let's fix that. Go back into object mode, right-click the model and choose Shade Smooth. This will clean things up a bit, but it still looks really choppy, so go into the modifiers panel and add a subdivision modifier. You will likely lose some of your details like the dip between the shoulder blades, so go into edit mode and make the details sharper. You may also want to go back into sculpt mode and smooth out any rough edges you may have missed before. Now onto the neck. Disable the subdivision modifier for when you're in edit mode and delete the 4 forward-facing faces where the neck will come out. Select the edge loop and extrude the neck outward. Adjust the vertices around it until the neck opening is a fairly smooth oval shape, then extrude it a few times to make it the right length. Use sculpt mode to smooth everything out and make more precise adjustments in edit mode. For the tail, select the 4 faces at your character's back and extrude them. Instead of dragging it outward, however, you'll need to press S to scale them inward. Move the new faces out and up slightly to match the reference. Move the vertices to form a rounded shape, but try not to distort the planes too much. Extrude the faces again, this time outward slightly, and scale it down. This will be the base of the tail. Extrude it again, this time almost to the end of the tail. Extrude again, scale down, then extrude it one more time and press M, then choose Center to merge the vertices together to form the tip of the tail. When you look at it in perspective view, it'll probably look very strange, but you can easily fix this by selecting all the tip vertices and moving them back along the Y-axis. Add some edge loops to the tail. As you work, try to keep looking over your model for things that need to be fixed or adjusted to look better. Okay, now we can move on to the paws. I like to model one paw separately and use it for all of them, since making just one is both easier and tends to look better in the end. Hide everything in the scene and unhide the paw reference, but keep it off to the side. As with all of our other meshes, add a cube in object mode, subdivide it twice with smoothing turned on, loop cut in the middle, and delete the extra vertices. Add a mirror modifier as well. Return to object mode and add another cube. Subdivide this one only once, scale it down, then scale it up on the X-axis and Z-axis to make it longer and taller. Or you could just scale it down on the Y-axis. Either way works. Duplicate the first toe by pressing Shift and D at the same time, then move it beside the first toe. Scale it down and rotate it on the Z-axis. Select both toes and the main paw by holding down Shift while selecting them, then Ctrl and J at the same time to join the pieces together. Go into Edit mode. Make sure in proportional editing that Connected Only is not checked. To select an entire toe, select a single vertex, face, or plane, then press L to select everything in that piece. Use the Loop Cut tool to add 2 edge loops around the paw parallel to the toes. Now delete the 4 faces closest to the big toe. On the toe itself, delete the 4 faces closest to the paw. In Vertex Select, move your view to inside the paw, select the middle bottom vertex and extrude once, about halfway through the opening. Shift select the middle top vertex and press F to fill the gap. Now with the edge select enabled, select 2 of the matching edges and press F to fill them. Now select the longest edge, which should be this one right here, and press F until there are no more gaps between the toe and the paw. Repeat this process with the second toe, but without making additional vertices. With the toe attached, scale, flatten, and move things as needed to make the shapes more paw-like. Add a few edge loops around the side of the paw. Most cats have some webbing between their toes, so we're going to make that now. You'll likely need to spread the toes out more to pull the webbing into place. Do this by switching the view to the Z-axis orthographic view with X-ray turned on, and using C to brush select each toe individually. Rotate them into place, then continue adding the webbing. Once you're done with that, you should have something that looks a bit like this. Now we can add sheaths for the cat's claws. Extrude one of the toe tips out, scale it down, and rotate it on the Y-axis slightly. Position it as needed. In Edge Select, select the edges running down the middle of the toe tip, and move them back slightly. Move the edges of either side forward and inward to make a little indentation in the toe. Repeat this step for the outer toe. Go into Object Mode, right-click the paw and choose Shade Smooth. Add a subdivision modifier as well. Okay, now we can add the pads. Make a cube, subdivide it only once and scale it down, then scale it up on the X-axis. Match it up with the bigger toe, then duplicate it with Shift D, and drag the duplicate over to the other toe. Select the 2 pads and the paw, then hit Ctrl J to join everything. I accidentally put the pads on the wrong side. If this happened to you too, don't panic. It works no matter which side you put them on. If anything, it'll make it easier to tweak the toe pads. For the large pad, make another cube, subdivide it twice, loop cut it down the middle, and add a mirror modifier. Scale it down on the Z-axis to flatten it. You'll probably need your paw reference for this, so rotate your reference as needed so you can see it while working in the Z orthographic view. Once the pad has been shaped, join it with the rest of the paw and move it into place in Edit mode. Scale, rotate, and otherwise adjust it until it looks about right. Now you can apply the mirror modifier to solidify the mesh by clicking the drop-down arrow in the Modifiers tab. Now it's time to add the paw to the main model. Turn on the visibility of the body and the side reference. You'll probably need to scale the paw down a lot. Use the reference as a guide for how big it should be. Make sure you scale it in the orthographic view though, since the perspective view will make the paw in the reference appear much smaller than it should be. Once the paw is in place, select the paw, then the body, and then use Ctrl J to join them. It's important that you do it in this order because if you select the body first like I did, you'll lose the mirror modifier. Now, in Edit mode, count how many vertices make up the opening in the leg. Then try to find a group of vertices with the same number and the paw, and delete the faces inside that group. The opening will likely seem a bit small due to the paws being a higher poly than the legs, but we'll fix that later. Now select the paw by pressing L or by box selecting with X-ray turned on. Duplicate it with Shift D, and then bring it back to the hind leg. Going back to the front leg, make a new face by selecting an edge from the paw and the closest edge on the leg, then press F. Use F to fill up the rest of the edges. If you're left with an open triangle, you probably miscounted and will likely need to delete more faces from the paw or backtrack to delete less. Once it's filled, you'll probably end up with something like this. It looks weird right now, but you can use the smoothing tool in Sculpt mode to clean up the overall wrist shape. Make smaller adjustments in Edit mode to clean it up. Remember to try to keep the faces as free from distortions as possible. Now follow the same steps for the hind leg. This time you'll need to add loop cuts to the new faces. To work on the dew claw, first turn off the visibility of the mirror modifier for when you're in edit mode. This will make it easier to see what you're doing. Choose 4 faces on the inside of the wrist and make the vertices form a slight circle. Select the faces themselves, delete them, then extrude the edge loop inward by scaling it down. Extrude it downward, then flatten it out by scaling it on the Y-axis. In Vertex Select mode, fix any deformations around the loop. Extrude it outward 2 more times, scale it down with the second extrusion, extrude again, scale it down again, then fill the gap with 3 faces. Make the claw sheath by extruding those 3 faces inward and shrinking them slightly. Duplicate one of the toe pads and move it onto the dew toe. Double check the rest of the model for any places the mesh might not be clipped properly, then apply the mirror modifier. And that's all for now. These techniques can be used to model pretty much any quadruped, so you could definitely apply this to a dog model, a wolf, a bear, anything like that. Obviously the proportions will be different depending on the animal, but the way topography works is the same no matter what animal you choose to go with. I hope you found this helpful. Stay tuned for part 2 where we'll be working on making the head. Thank you all for watching, and happy blending, y'all!